Live from our studios on QCell Avenue. Good morning, viewers, from wherever you're watching us from. It's good to be back to yet another edition of QTV This Morning program. And I am your host, Julden Jai. I am with Mr. Ade Drame, the head of news at QTV. Good morning.
Good morning, Julde, and it's always a pleasure to be here and co-host. And to our viewers who might be confused that nowadays we say QCell Avenue. The reason we say that, we used to say Kairaba Avenue.
Yes.
Because that made it easy to find us.
Right.
Because the street where we actually are on didn't have a name before.
Yes.
Well, it has a name now. It's QCell Avenue. That's why we say QCell Avenue.
I'm glad you said that. Our newspaper review guest this morning is Ibrahim Dabo. He is a freelance journalist.
Yes.
And he also contributing so much towards, you know, journalism in this country.
And he's also been a guest on Kashadula. Is that right?
Yes, Kachadula, yes.
Yep.
Good
Yep.
morning, Ibrahim.
Good morning, Julie.
How
It's
are
a pleasure.
you?
I'm very fine.
Good.
And I like that both of you are smiling.
It's called the Smiling Coast of Africa.
Africa, and you put up a beautiful smile.
Well,
you know, both you and Ade.
We want to lift the spirits of the viewers.
Yes.
And we always say, or I always say that if you're the kind of person who drinks coffee, this show should actually replace your early morning coffee pickup.
Yes.
It should be that kind of pickup. And that's why, you know, you'll see us smiling most of the time.
And it actually made me feel home.
Happy.
Thank you so much.
So,
Thank
Julie,
you.
what's on the program today?
So, program, unlike yesterday,
Yeah.
we only going to look at the African proverb and, of course, the newspaper review because of the African caucus, which started yesterday and which will run until the 8th of July. Which
Sponsored by
tomorrow.
QCell.
QCell, yes, sponsored by QCell Gambia.
Yeah.
So this morning, Dangote is going to...
Aliko Dangote,
Yes,
Africa's richest man, will be speaking at
Yes.
the conference, at Dauda Conference Center.
Yes. So
And,
we'll be linking.
That's right. And after that, he's going to State House to meet
State
His
House,
Excellency
exactly,
the President.
President Adama Barrow.
Yes.
So let's head straight to the African proverb.
Shall I read
Mr.
it?
Adi? Yes.
I love this one. For fear of the leopard, the goat stays with people. And I was saying before we came on air that I'm glad that this time we've attributed it to a particular country.
Yes.
And this one is attributed to Liberia. So I'll read it once again. For fear of the leopard, the goat stays with people. Now, it wouldn't be fair to go straight to Ibrahim as this is his first time on this morning. So, Julde, can I come to you? Then?
Oh my God. All right, that's fine. At least we'll give Ibrahim the opportunity.
Yes.
But yeah, my own interpretation is that, you know, that the God will not in an ordinary situation go to live with the people. You know, if we're told that it does not fear the leopard. But because it is fearing a greater danger, staying with the leopard, so the God decided to stay with people, meaning people can make up or come up with decisions if they will not ordinarily have made if we're told that the danger in the other choice was not really greater.
Yes.
So people settle for things that they feel like, you know, they are more at ease, more relaxed, and you know, less danger than, even though it is not favorable for them, but people always tend to go to situations that are more favorable and accommodative to them than, you know, otherwise.
Yeah, that's a good interpretation because you know, sometimes we run from what we realize or we think is the most obvious danger, because even people can be dangerous to the goat, but the goat might think, well, these people, they might want me for my milk and other things. I might not be slaughtered straight away. So, but you know, they know that when it comes to the leopard isn't even caring about that. You know, see it and oh, that's food. You know, and that's the danger. So you run from what is the more obvious danger, as Julie rightly says, and then sometimes you go to something that there's a danger there, but it's a slightly lesser danger than the one that is the most obvious and ever-present one. So what's your take, Ibrahim?
I think in this situation, the goat is a very good analyst.
Yes.
Indeed.
Yes, because the goat has been able to identify where, as you said, the obvious danger lies.
Yeah.
You know, because living with people is seeking protection.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the goat is seeking protection by living with the people.
Yeah.
The leopard is a predator.
Yeah,
And it is, in science terms, carnivorous.
Yeah. Carnivorous.
Yes. So it could eat the goat at any time.
Yeah, indeed.
So the goat seeking protection by living with people shows the smartness of the goat, but
indeed.
also it interprets to our lives as well.
Yeah.
You know, that the environment where we operate is very important. Coming from a teaching background, I'll always tell my teachers that the environment you create for children is what attracts them to school.
Sure.
You know, and then if the goat is seeking that environment, so I believe that's also a very good lesson for people to learn, that always you have to analyze and run away from obvious danger, but also you have to ensure that your environment adapts to your needs as an individual.
Right.
Yes. Oh, I like that. Yes.
That's a good one.
Yes,
you know,
indeed.
taking it from the environmental perspective is really good.
Yeah. I mean, particularly, I like the fact that you talk about, you know, teachers creating a particular enabling environment. You could literally take it to schools where I grew up, where there were certain teachers who I dreaded going to their classes because, for me, they weren't good teachers. They spent half the time shouting at students, at pupils. Or beating them, whilst others were more kind of accommodating. You know, you had classes of 40, 45, so they're quite big. And so if you had, you know, a pupil who was quite shy, you had to know how to bring them out and get, you know, things out of them, not by shouting at them, because not everybody's kind of upfront and you know, or even particularly articulate. So, you know, if they're not, you know, how do you still get something from them so that they feel involved? And yet you'd go to another teacher and all they do is shout.
There's something we call positive discipline. You know, it is making sure that your relationship is based on reciprocation.
Yeah, quite.
You know, so if Ade creates a very good environment for the staff at QTV or with people within the newsroom, they have the confidence to approach Ade and sort out things together. But if he frowns every day,
that's it.
So probably Julia will fear to be on air with him.
Mr. Ade,
right?
So essentially, people go to places where they find peace, you know, which I think is very important. Sometimes, you know, you find yourself in environments where you have literally everything. But one fundamental thing that you have, which is more dangerous, is you don't have a peace of mind. So you move and then seek that peace of mind.
In fact, if you hadn't said, because initially you said peace, and I was going to interject and say, in fact, peace of mind is even more important than just finding peace. You're absolutely right. I agree. So yeah, I think we've exhausted the proverb. So thank you for that interpretation, and I like the twist you put on it.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ibrahima. Viewers will take a short break. After the break, we will review the newspapers. We'll be right back. Welcome back. If you're just tuning in, this is QTV This Morning, and I am Julden Jai with Mr. Ade Drame, and our newspaper review guest is Ibrahima Dabo. From the African Proverb, we head straight to the newspaper review. Mr. Ade, we have Standard, Foroya, and of course the Point newspaper. On the Point newspaper, no remorse, Latrikunda German mother suspect outburst shock onlookers in Kanifing Court. This was yesterday.
Yeah, apparently
I was shocked when I
he was he was not remorseful, and as he says, he's a murder suspect. Although, you know, effectively he's the one that had been identified, but he's not been convicted yet. But apparently he showed no remorse, and even in the picture that they've used, he's given the double middle finger to the photographers and everybody else, and so he seems completely, you know, uncaring about what anybody thinks. And apparently that was even evident in how he behaved in the court. There was no decorum from him, and you know, it was quite sort of. So initially, the state had been asked to provide a lawyer for him because he didn't have his own lawyer, and once that was done, then the case could proceed. But I think he's not even happy with the lawyer that's been provided for him.
The Kanifing court lacks the jurisdiction to hear the court. Now they're transferred to the High Court. Ibrahim, what do you make of this headline?
I saw the image. So when I saw the image and also analyzed his words and body language, I said, but first, here is a murder suspect who was on the run. Initially, he was on the run.
Right.
So the police had to search for him. And also, when he was arrested, the people within the community wanted to do mob justice. And he was protected by the police. But then again, when he appears on camera, he appears like he's happy doing what he did.
He's defiant,
So, and then this was right in front of the family of the deceased. So, which raised questions as well. This could be, was he on the run because he felt guilty? Okay. Or was he on the run because he feared what will come after him when he did the crime? And now that he is appearing or he is behaving this way, is he in fact in conflict? Is there a psychological pressure on him?
I'm glad you mentioned that because that's where I was going to go. Whether they've done
is he in conflict with his mind?
When I saw that, I was like, that's not normal for like a murder suspect to behave the way he was behaving. You know, yesterday, I was like, that's abnormal.
I'm not a psychologist, but then always there's this common saying of cognitive dissonance.
Yes.
You know,
Madam Kantara was a cognitive.
Of course, dissonance when your actions are not in line with your thoughts.
That's right.
And it could be that there's a big psychological conflict, you know, a pressure that is prompting him to behave this way. But let's see, as you said, the Kanifing court lacked the jurisdiction to prosecute this case. But it is important that also he is taken to the Kanifing court because then he would have exhausted the 72 hours limit, you know, and then it would have been an unlawful detention.
That's right.
So technically, it was right to take him to the Kanifing court, you know, before transferring the case to the High Court.
Absolutely.
But let's see whether he will behave this way in court, because there is also what they call demeanor.
Of course.
If Barrister Ndur is watching, you know, this text back or to our class with him,
media law and
ethics class, you know. So demeanor, that takes us to demeanor. You know, so whether he is actually going to be the same way that he appears on camera, flipping his fingers and you know, saying all sort of words to the crowd. Let's see how that happens.
Exactly. And this raises the questions, because when this video surfaced yesterday, a lot of people, there is this debate about, you know, the death penalty, and you hear all sorts of arguments, others saying, in fact, even him being taken to the Mile 2 Central prisons is a waste of taxpayers' money. You know, people can be emotional. Right, but no matter the crime that one's commit, it is important to know that, you know, the fundamental of rights of every individual should be protected and should be respected, no matter what.
Because the death penalty is one of those ones where if you make a mistake, there's no turning back. You can jail somebody incorrectly and they could serve 20 or 25 years in prison, and then you find out they were not guilty. But if you've hanged somebody and then you find out they were not guilty, you cannot reverse that. And that's why many countries have done away with it. And even in the countries that do have the death penalty, whether it's China, the United States of America, as Dr. Ismaila Cissé said last week when somebody was asking for the death penalty, he said there's absolutely no statistics anywhere in the world that show just because you kill people, people do not commit murder. No country has any stats that prove that, you know. So, you know, in China, you get executed even for corruption, and yet people are still prosecuted and executed almost on a daily basis. It has not stopped it. And if sometimes in a murder situation, it's a spontaneous thing. There's an argument that happens. You don't stop and think, oh, my country has the death penalty, I'd better stop what I'm about to do. You don't. You act in the heat of the moment. And of course you might regret it, but you know, that doesn't take it. So yes, I mean, the countries that have done away with the death penalty, every time something high profile comes, there's always a clamor to bring it back. But I think one always has to resist that. Because
2 weeks ago there was someone was sentenced to death 2 weeks ago at the court for murder as well.
Because the law still allows us
to do
the
so.
Incident.
The Bullfoot incident.
Yes.
But equally so, there are, in such cases, there are questions again that we should ask. Also, because of the nature of our society, there are high moral standards within our society. You know, and although someone could be sentenced to death, but in actual terms, that sentencing really happens.
No, I mean we've you know there is effectively been commuted. That there's a moratorium on executing. So we've not removed it from the statute books. It's still there. Last week we were discussing a case here where a former armed forces minister in Sierra Leone had been very vocal about bringing back hanging, and he'd taken all the media to Pademba Road, the main prison in Freetown, showed them the gallows, told everybody that he had got it working again, and that the next person who is going to be sentenced would be hanged. And this is not made up. You could look it up. His name is Paulo Contes, actually somebody I know. 6 months after he was out of office and he was in opposition, he went to State House to meet the president, and he had a gun concealed. He was arrested, tried for treason, and sentenced to hang. And he would have been the first person to be hanged. And I mean, how ironic is that? You know, had they carried it, in the end, the sentence was commuted. But it just shows you how you know, kind of fragile and fickle these things can be. And
right. So moving on to the Foroya newspaper, Jahali rice farmers say shortage of farm machinery is delaying farming activities. Jahali is a farming community.
Very much. When you mention Jahali, people think of rice. And if you go back to as far as 1969, for example, and you look at the rice yields in Jahali, it was high. I know the country's population wasn't as great as it is now, but you know the rice yield then was really high, and people were getting excited back in 1969 that this country was going to be self-sufficient in rice. Of course, we know that didn't happen for all sorts of reasons. You know, in spite of the fact that we had a president, you know, Jawara at the time, who very much believed in that. This is it. You know, who believed in that and so on. We're still struggling with it, and it's quite sad in a way to hear them say that because of, you know, the lack of this, that. But, you know, we know there have been a lot of inputs into the sector and to address that, because we still talk about food self-sufficiency by 2030. We're only 4 years away from that. And, you know, and that's very ambitious in that space of time. Particularly, you know, we must be one of the few countries where our staple food, which is rice, is 90% imported. That's definitely not sustainable or even sensible. You know, you can't, you know, your staple food can't be imported to that level. And so we're thinking of going from that to self-sufficiency. It's quite a big task, I think.
And I'm glad you mentioned the word sovereignty. Because food is connected to sovereignty.
Very much.
You know, for a state to be sovereign, you have to have food self-sufficiency. You know, beside energy, you know, and technology. So, and Jahali Pachar, you know, fits in that equation for the Gambia. You know, before, back in the days, as you made mention of, you know, this place has been a place where rice is cultivated, commercial agriculture.
Big time.
Big time is there, and then that was complemented, you know, by a large scale of subsistence agriculture across the country, and to an extent that if you talk to people who lived during those days, they will say the rice that we eat smells. The rice, the imported rice smells. You know, they are so much comfortable eating what they grow, and they have it in abundance that they don't want to eat what we are eating now. That's very important.
President Yahya Jammeh had this slogan: "Eat what you grow and grow what you eat."
I know it was
a famous one.
It was a nice slogan that tripped off the tongue easily. But for you to make that happen, you have to put certain things in place. It has to go beyond just the rhetoric, beyond talking. And it's a thing that we're very good at. You know, it's just in the same way that we pass lots of laws and we never implement them. You know, everything from traffic laws to whatever, you name it. We're good at passing the laws, and it's all there in the statute books. but do we deliver on it? Do we make, eat what you grow and grow what you eat? Okay, what do I need to make that happen? Do I need the equipment? Do I need the fertilizer? Do I need the seeds, the support, and so on? The transportation, all of that, they're all connected,
Yeah, but I think one feature that always keeps Jahali Pachar in the conversation of food self-sufficiency is that CRR in general, if you understand the River Gambia, from Kaur to Basse is fresh water, and then the immediate land next to the river bank is a fertile land, and this could be cultivated throughout the year. And then so you could cultivate rice, all year round.
And that's what we've seen with some of the recent, for example, Kopia, the Korean folks who are here. That's what they've been trying to do, and sort of to introduce that it can be an all year round thing, not just a kind of seasonal thing, as you rightly say.
That's very important.
Okay, now let's move on to the big story of the day. Former Auditor General Modou Cisse, last year the Gambia Police Force officers forcibly removed him from his office after he refused President Barrow's decision to move to the Ministry of Trade, Industry, Regional Integration and Employment, allegedly.
What's the allegedly bit?
Well, because
we saw him I've even got the video. In fact, if I knew we were bringing this story, I would have played the video. I have the video of him being removed forcibly
not the forcibly part, where he said, the employment.
Yes.
Because he said he was not given employment. The state claimed that he was given employment later, and later he refused to take it.
Yes, I mean, there's a very good reason why it's gone all the way up to the Supreme Court, because it was quite unprecedented what we saw. An Auditor General being removed who had not expressed any wish to move. There'd been a press release saying he'd been appointed, or at least a statement from government saying he'd been appointed, and then a day later, or less than 12 hours later actually, came out to say that no, he wanted to stay Auditor General, and that he was, respectfully declining it's unprecedented. I mean, we've had cases in other countries, including in Sierra Leone, where a lady called Lara Taylor Pierce was the Auditor General, and she was removed, quite similar circumstances, but she had issued a report that was very critical of the sitting president, Mada Bio, very critical of the of the First Lady's office, and spending and so on. And to everybody's shock, she was removed. She took her case similarly all the way through the courts, right to the Supreme Court, but she was never reinstated. And effectively, she did not win the case, because people could not remember a time when an Auditor General had been removed in those circumstances. There have been times where they've been replaced, but not when seemingly they hadn't done anything wrong, they hadn't expressed a wish to leave and so on. And this one is complicated by the fact that he was offered a ministerial position and turned it down.
Yeah, I think it has been a constitutional debate since this has happened, because a lot of people are asking the question, does the government has the right to remove
an Auditor General?
An Auditor General. Okay, is he not in fact protected by the Constitution?
That's it.
Has he at any point expressed any form of incapacitation?
Yeah, go ahead.
And then has he at any point conduct any form of professional misconduct that warrants the government to dismiss him?
That's the debate.
So that's the debate, and I think that's why it has taken us this far. And today is going to be a very important day, because the constitutionality or the unconstitutionality of the issue would be cleared today. So I know from today also the case will continue, because there could be an appeal. He
could take it to ECOWAS court, or even, so it could go on and on.
It could go on and on. Today could be a judgment, but it might not be the conclusion of the case, because it can be taken to the other end. But the most important thing about all this, shows the level of our democracy as a country. It shows that, the president might not be the utmost power in the country. It shows that citizens have the right to challenge the decision of the government, and they can always rely on the courts, you know, to address what sort of grievance they have against the government, or if they feel their rights has been violated, especially in the case of the Auditor General, who felt
and this was
the independence of the judiciary have been tested over the years.
Well, I was going to say, because this was an argument that I had with people. So there was a report that our colleague Mam Nabuka did last week. I'd attended an IEC event, and I had mentioned that, you know, I could not find, since I've been at QTV, we've been trying to do a story on people who were prosecuted and found guilty of voter fraud. We can't find a single case. So I directly asked the IEC chairman, could he give us the numbers? And what he said, and it's on record, was that in fact they have one case which is currently under investigation. So the person hasn't been charged, they haven't been prosecuted, under investigation. So I said that, you know, all this noise was a kind of, you know, exaggeration about it. But then the debate went online and people were saying, and so I said, well, they can take it to the courts, because we've seen very many high-profile cases by the state that have been lost by the state.
Of course.
The PIU shooter case, and you can name 4 or 5 big cases. And I said, no, they were saying the courts were not independent. And I said, no, if the courts were not independent, the state would have won every case that they took forward. And yet they didn't. And this is another one where let's see the judgment and whether it's appealed. But the fact that it's gone as far as the Supreme Court tells us that, yes, you know, and the judgment will be for all to see.
Yeah, if there's a question mark over the independence of the court, certain high-profile cases might not
they wouldn't have been lost by the state.
Yes, you know. So especially you've made reference to the police shooting case. You know, so for the government to lost a case like that, it also signals where our democracy is and also the independence of our judiciary system.
Because they could lean on the court and say, we want you to find this person guilty, whether the evidence supports it or not. But it was in an open court, and everybody saw and heard, and Justice Jaite gave a very lengthy judgment, and we know it's been appealed, but nonetheless, you know,
and in German times, my colleagues will say kangaroo courts.
Kangaroo courts, essentially.
It's no more a kangaroo court.
Right. Interesting. So moving on the Standard newspaper, police investigate killing of 14-year-old boy in Daru Busumbala. And you know, just to reflect on, you know, what really transpired, according to the Gambia Police Force, investigations are, you know, police are investigating a suspected murder following the death of Mohamed Kamara, a 14-year-old student of Daru Busumbala, West Coast region. Preliminary findings indicate that the victim allegedly sustained fatal injuries after being assaulted by a group of individuals on Saturday, the 4th of July.
That's right. And you know, we don't know what the situation was, whether there was an altercation, a disagreement about something, and that's the thing I was mentioning earlier. You know, things can flare up in the heat of the moment. That young person was probably looking forward to going to school on Monday, and then over the weekend you lose your life in, you know, being assaulted by individuals. We don't know what the circumstances that led to the alleged assault. But that young man has now lost his life. A tragedy for...
And they are all teenagers. A 13-year-old and a 15-year-old
are among the suspects, So
and they all have criminal liabilities, because in the Gambia, criminal liability is at 12. So if a 13, 14, 15-year-old is suspected of murder, so it means they're criminally liable. You know, but also this has to do with our society also, because I think it has some connection to parenting. In other way, coming from a child right background, so we believe that a positive parenting have a lifelong impact, you know, on children. And for the past 5 months, most of the murder cases that were reported involved teenagers. You know, just 2 weeks ago, there was one at Latikunda Savage that happens at an event, you know, and the suspect is 18 years old. 3 months ago, there was a murder that happened, and the suspect is 16 years old. You know, and growing back to the last 5 years, you could also see that there are reports of gang violences involving children. You know, and this shows that we have a lot to do. But also how are we trying to protect our children as well? But what activities do we have for children in our country, especially recreational activities? You know, children.
It's a difficult one, because even in countries where they have all of that, all of these things, I think you're right. I think kind of the parenting and the kind of home background has a lot to do with it. I moved from London to here, and London, unfortunately, is like the teenage murder capital of Europe. Stabbings are so commonplace now that some people are even scared to send their children to school. That's in London, in England. You know, without exaggeration, not a week can go by without you reading of, you know, a teenager stabbed by another teenager and so on. And as you rightly say, one has to wonder why there is that kind of prevalence among teenagers to resort to violence. You know, all kind of murder suspects don't have the same background, obviously, or the same upbringing, or the same living conditions and so on. But, you know, one has to kind of look at the cases individually and see whether there is a pattern beyond the sort of age demographic of the suspects.
And I think that pattern is very important, because beyond killings, there are reported robberies, you know, and burglaries involving group of children. So children, there are continuous reported engagement of children in organized crimes. So we need to study, you know, and understand exactly what's going on, and also that we can have amicable solutions, especially at those areas, the Daru Busumbala and down towards Fajikunda. You know, there are reports of gun violences involving children around those areas. So we need, and then also most of the activities, or the criminal activities around the Serekunda West Park, you know, during the times of in-the-house.
You had your phone snatched from you by a young person, not 2 weeks ago or whatever it was. You know, just here. You know, so it's our former colleague Lena standing outside UTG, and somebody just came on a motorbike and snatched her iPhone. You know, those are kind of opportunistic things that people who don't want to work for a living see something that's kind of easy to
also
steal, you know?
Try to see if there is a relation between what is happening now and the prevalence of drug abuse.
Of course, Yeah, that's it. I mean, in a lot of cases, there have been linkages between that and drug abuse. You're absolutely right. So what next?
Okay, we have another headline on the Standard. That is their main headline, actually. Baba Lee, 2 others to leave NHRC, that is the National Human Rights Commission.
Yeah, all these commissions should kind of rotate and refresh their board members. They shouldn't be jobs for life.
Right.
And so I think it's a kind of natural cycle that they're going through, that Baba Lee and a couple of others are now going to depart, and we'll see who replaces them. But generally, National Human Rights Commission has quite a good reputation in the Gambia. They always comment on and speak out against all sorts of human rights abuses and so on. So yeah, it will be interesting to see who replaces them. But it's the natural course of things that there should be change, and it's good to see, because we have lots of these where you have people that've been there 10, 15 years. It should not be the case. You know, you should come serve a certain length of time. You move on, and then others who are equally competent come and replace you, and the whole thing keeps fresh. And those coming in come with fresh ideas to refresh the organization, and who knows, might even take it in a different direction. I think it's good.
And I am also. I'll follow keenly to see who is going to replace.
I think all of us will.
Who will replace Baba Lee? Because he's a religious leader who brings in a different perspective on the table.
That's right.
You know, so now the kind of religious leader who is going to replace him in that position, you know, will be very interesting. Indeed. So I will keenly follow to see what happens.
I think all of us will keenly follow this one. I think we're all intrigued. But you know, again, to say, I think it's a good thing that this is happening, and you just wish other organizations would follow suit and emulate what they're doing at the NHRC.
One thing that should happen for them is I think we should lobby for increment of their budget, because they has a huge task and operating on a low budget. So and then issues of human rights in a democracy.
On the state of human rights in the country. So moving on, still on the Standard, AU report warns $43 million military asset transfer to Gambia. Orders could cripple Africa's standby force.
Yeah, I read this, and I have to be honest, I don't know what the asset transfer refers to. We know that they've been talking about having a standby force to be a kind of intervention force in various conflicts, beyond a kind of just a peacekeeping force, where they'd be also almost interventionist. So I don't know what the asset transfer is. 43 million sounds a lot. I guess hardware to that amount, and $43 million, by the way, might be transferred to the Gambia. Why? Is it for ECOMIG, or is it for, because the Sahel region, you and I had discussed this on another day, what's happening there is causing a lot of concern in the, in the greater West Africa region, really. And so this kind of talk of a standby force has been going on for quite a while now. So I'd be quite intrigued, but I don't know the deeper detail, I must confess, as to what exactly this asset transfer relates to.
Okay. So
maybe the ECOWAS is also trying to take cue from, there was ECOMOG
in Sierra Leone
and Liberia, and now there is ECOMIG in the Gambia. So instead of just interventions, as you said, the issue of a standby force has been on the table for far too long. So I don't know how the technicalities would be to ensure something of such happens for ECOWAS. But then let's see how it goes.
So there is a story on the East Africa, and it says a planned transfer of nearly $43 million worth of equipment from the African Union's Continental Logistics Base in Cameroon to Liberia, Sierra Leone and the Gambia could cripple the continent's African standby force and deplete more than half of its strategic deployment, stockpile, and internal AU report warns.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting reading or hearing that, because when you look at it, a lot of this equipment has been sitting there unused, and we've been theorizing about this standby force. It hasn't happened. So maybe it's good that it's being deployed in areas where they think it needs to be deployed and used before it becomes obsolete, and we keep on talking about the standby force, which never seems to kind of take wings and fly. So yeah, I mean, that gives it some context, I guess.
All right, so let's move on to the Point newspaper, I guess. Okay, Gambia hosts historic African caucus as Barrow calls for investment and innovation. That's a good one. Yeah, investment and innovation. We should certainly get that from this.
Well, we were discussing this before we came on air.
Yes.
Initially, we were talking about the fact that Aliko Dangote will be there, Africa's richest man, and the opportunities that it presents. Gambia and other, countries should use this as an opportunity to sell itself and to network for investments. And I'd mentioned when I'd watched about 3 years ago,
so that's
UN General Assembly, and here we are, we can see.
The Sadauda Karaba Jawara International Conference Center. Some of the guests are already seated, waiting for the,
Yes, they're like just over 15 or 16 minutes before Mr. Dangote takes to the stage. I think all of them will want to be there for that. Yes. To meet him. I
myself will want to meet Dangote.
So would I.
Who wouldn't want to?
Absolutely, I certainly would. And so it will be interesting to hear what he has to say, because there's a particular theme. And I think innovation and investment are very much at the heart of what we're saying, because Africa also, and trade, we trade so little with each other, and we keep talking about AFCFTA and how this should you know, kind of make things easier. But we have to go, we mentioned earlier in another story, going beyond the theorizing, beyond talking about it, to the doing of it, you know, and that's what, you know, has certainly from the speeches we heard yesterday, a lot of people talked about, you know, we need to get beyond conferences like this to ones that are purely about investment, about innovation, and how innovation is going to affect us, and also how the outside world, you know, look at the way that America took away USAID and closed it down, and all that funding that was going to different health programs in various African countries was suddenly taken away now. And now they want to do individual deals with the African countries, and they withdrew from the World Health Organization as well, the United States of America, saying we're funding it way too much, you know, compared to what others are putting in. So all those things have made Africa sit up and take notice and say, okay, maybe we need to start thinking strategically, and how can we collaborate and work better in all sorts of ways, investment, in innovation and so on, share ideas, share knowledge, you know. So all of these conferences, they have to be more than mere talking shops, I think.
Yes.
Talking shops.
they have to be more than that.
It's a very good one, talking shop. It's talking shop.
Because, that's the danger of these. You know, you hear people make all these big bombastic speeches, but now I'm getting a sense that we're getting away from that. And certainly this one, the last one was in Bangui in Central African Republic. And I watched the thing in preparation for this. And they've kind of moved up a gear as far as I'm concerned in terms of, you know, what is happening and what is being said at this year's conference. And hopefully next year will be up another notch and so on. And hopefully the Gambia will benefit in terms of investments that will come, because people will see it as an attractive investment destination. And that's certainly something that we have to really make, because for 3 days, 6th, 7th and 8th of this month, the eyes of the financial world in Africa are fixed on the Gambia. We have to seize that opportunity.
Exactly. And this time the private sector is very much involved. And also the National Center for Arts and Culture, they're also very much involved. So I think they should really leverage on this opportunity. Really.
It brings a lot of opportunities. You know, as you said, a lot of investment deals will be discussed. I understand the Gambia had already made a presentation of its development plan.
That's right.
You know, and also there's a 160 million energy dollar plan that was signed by the Ministry of Finance, and this has to do with electricity supply for the Gambia and Togo. So that is a very important aspect of it, and the fact that Mr. Dangote, who is not just a billionaire but an industrialist, would have a bilateral with our president. So there's a lot of investment opportunities that can arise from those negotiations, and
hopefully even with members of the private sector.
Yes.
Well, we hope so, because some of them will hopefully meet him at this event. Some of them might meet him at State House. And they'll be talking and whispering in his ear, hey, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? This is it. Because, you know, he can't know everything, although he might have people who do all his research for him. But there'll be nothing better than meeting, you know, for argument's sake, somebody like Mohamed Jah and saying, actually Gambia is a very good investment destination. You might want to think about it. So,
And these days we are talking too much about energy crisis. You know, and the fact that he eyes a big investment in the energy sector in Nigeria and now in East Africa. You know, that could be another potential area that he could explore here in the Gambia. But I'm glad that you mentioned the Africa Continental Free Trade area. You know, that has been something that is also on the table at the discussion. So I came across the speech of the Minister of Trade, Minister of Trade, and then economic regional integration is a key aspect, you know, of trying to ensure that there is economic growth within Africa, especially at a time when you know, we believe that the world there are a lot of inconsistencies happening around the world. You know, from Ukraine to Iran, and then, you know, supply chains are disrupted, you know, and some of those are having a great impact, you know, on the African continent. So how do we promote economic integration within Africa to ensure that the Africa attains that energy sufficiency. Because I made mention of it before, that sovereignty comes in three folds. One is economic sovereignty, energy sovereignty, two is technology, and three is food. So if you are not sovereign in those three aspects, it means that still you have a lot of work to do, and I think such high-level discussions in terms of boosting Africa's economic growth, will definitely contribute towards the sovereignty of the African continent.
100% agree. I mean, when things happen like the America and Israel attack on Iran and the disruptions that followed, one of the arguments and the discussions that came up was that, hang on, there are so many African countries that are oil-producing countries. Why are African countries buying their oil from the Middle East, not from other African countries? It just seemed kind of
what is really happening.
What's happening, and why is it? You're saying, okay, the supply is interrupted from there. But then if you go around the African continent, east, west, north, south, there are oil-producing countries.
Lot of them.
Why are you not buying from them? Why are you buying from Middle Eastern countries? And that's
it's a big
so question. It's time to kind of think and do a reboot and think, oh, maybe we need to change our strategy.
The Strait of Hormuz is far from Africa. Although it's a strategic
kind of
waterway.
almost on the tip.
It's a strategic waterway. But if the closure of the Strait of Hormuz can disrupt energy supplies in Africa, when we have large energy, we have countries that are large producing energy.
Wrong in
so
this
we need to look.
We need to look at ourselves,
and also within Europe now. After during the Ukraine-Russia war, and then the pipeline that runs from Russia to Europe to
quite.
Okay, so now Europe also is trying to look at Africa, as a way, for its own energy needs, and try to lean away from Russia and also all the chaos happening in the Middle East. So then we also need to look inward and see how do we make best use of some of those strategic opportunities that arises through some global crisis, especially within the energy sector.
And that's part of the discussion that we'll be having at the African Caucus over the next 3 days, or the 2 days that are left, today and tomorrow. Very much they'll be discussing along those lines. Have we got more? Or are we almost at an end? Have we got more time? Time for one more story?
Yeah. So that's the live event footage there from the Sir Dawda Kairaba Jawara International Conference Center, and officials are already taking their seat to start the discussion proper. We will. So yes, let's continue on the newspaper, because any time from now we will link to Sir Dawda.
Suppose Mr. Dramé has an opportunity to share words with Mr. Dangote. I want to know, what will be your priority?
My priority will be...
Interesting questions.
No, I mean, and a good one, because my priority will be that there are very many investment opportunities here in the Gambia, but also in our immediate sub-region. And I'll say to him, you built an oil refinery in Nigeria. Senegal is about to start exporting oil. Have you thought of building a refinery in this sub-region between here and and so on? So I think we're about to go.
So, we are about to go to Sir Dawda. Thank you very much, Mr. Ade. Thank you very much, Ibrahima, for joining us on the newspaper review. Viewers, this is all we have for this morning. We will link straight to Sir Dawda Kairaba Jawara International Conference Center for the second day of the African Caucus. Thank you.